Tom Selleck spent 50 years in Hollywood being exactly what people expect him to be: reliable, private, principled, and almost pathologically reluctant to say anything that could be considered a dramatic public statement. He does not do feuds. He does not do confessional interviews. He does not trade in the currency of celebrity disclosure that keeps the entertainment press running. So when he finally started speaking openly about James Garner, the man he has described as the single greatest professional influence of his life, people who know how Selleck operates understood that this was not casual conversation. He was saying something he had been sitting with for a very long time, and he wanted it on the record. What exactly did Garner show him that nobody else could? And why has it taken this long to say it fully? The relationship between Tom Selleck and James Garner is not the kind of Hollywood story that gets told very often, partly because it does not contain any of the elements that make Hollywood stories easy to package. There was no rivalry, no falling out, no dramatic reconciliation. There was simply a younger man watching an older one and understanding, over an extended period of time and with increasing clarity, that he was looking at the template for something he wanted to become. Selleck has been careful about how he has discussed Garner over the years, which is consistent with his general approach to anything he considers genuinely important. He tends to say more about the things that matter less and to guard the things that matter most. The fact that he has been speaking more openly about Garner in recent years, and with more specificity about what Garner actually gave him, reflects both the passage of time and the particular kind of perspective that arriving at 80 produces. What Selleck has said, in various contexts and with various degrees of directness, is that James Garner taught him things about the profession of acting and the business of being famous that no formal training had provided and that most of his contemporaries either did not know or did not practice. The most important of those things was not a technique or a skill. It was an orientation, the idea that how you treat people on a set, from the director to the person carrying equipment, is not a peripheral concern but a central one, and that a career built on genuine human decency is more durable than one built on talent alone. That lesson sounds simple enough to be obvious. But was it actually obvious in the environment where Selleck first encountered it? It was not obvious at all. Hollywood in the 1970s and 80s rewarded a specific kind of behavior: self-promotion, strategic positioning, the careful management of public image at the expense of private reality, and the treatment of professional relationships as instruments rather than ends in themselves. Garner operated entirely outside that framework, not as a protest or a philosophy but simply because it was not in his nature to operate inside it. Garner had built his public profile through Maverick, the late 1950s Western series that had made him famous by subverting every convention of the genre. His Brett Maverick was not a conventional television hero. He was charming and slightly evasive, more interested in avoiding trouble than courting it, and funny in a way that was entirely his own. The character worked because Garner's particular combination of ease and intelligence was not something that could be manufactured. It was him, adjusted for the requirements of the camera. By the time Selleck encountered Garner in any meaningful professional context, Garner was working on the Rockford Files, which had extended and deepened the public understanding of what he could do. Jim Rockford was a private investigator who was perpetually broke, frequently in over his head, and consistently more interested in self-preservation than heroism. Again, the character worked because Garner's fundamental qualities, the humor, the humanity, the absence of vanity about his own image, translated directly into the performance. Selleck watched all of this before he ever had a significant conversation with Garner, and what he was watching was not just a skilled performer doing good work. He was watching proof that you could have a long, genuinely respected career without becoming someone other than yourself in the process. Was that a lesson Selleck actually needed, given how grounded he already seemed to the outside world? He needed it more than most accounts suggest, because those accounts tend to begin with magnum PI and work backward as if everything before it was simply preparation. The reality is more complicated. Selleck was born in Detroit in 1945 and grew up in California after his family relocated. He was an athlete by primary inclination, tall and coordinated in ways that made basketball a genuine possibility, and he attended the University of Southern California on an athletic scholarship. Acting entered his life through a drama coach who saw something in him he had not yet seen in himself, and the early steps into the profession were tentative enough that a parallel path in something more conventional remained a genuine option for longer than most accounts suggest. He made his way through small television appearances across the late 1960s and through the 70s, the kind of work that provides experience and very little else. His name circulated without his career yet having a defining moment to attach it to. The Indiana Jones situation, which Selleck has discussed over the years with a combination of humor and honest acknowledgement of what it might have meant, was a genuine near miss. George Lucas and Steven Spielberg wanted him for the role that Harrison Ford eventually played in Raiders of the Lost Ark. The scheduling conflict with Magnum PI, which CBS was not willing to accommodate by releasing him for the film, kept it from happening. Selleck has handled the public discussion of this with characteristic good grace, focusing on Ford's definitive work in the role rather than dwelling on what might have been. But the fact of it is a useful reminder that careers at a certain level involve contingencies and timing that no amount of talent fully controls. What then did Magnum PI actually give him beyond the obvious commercial success? What it gave him, beginning in 1980, was not just a hit television show. It was a character whose fundamental qualities, warmth, humor, a kind of rugged decency that was never presented as effortless, happened to align closely with Selleck's actual personality. Thomas Magnum worked because Selleck was not performing the character from a distance, but inhabiting it from a place of genuine recognition. The show ran for 8 seasons, earned him an Emmy and a Golden Globe, and established him as one of the most recognizable television presences of the decade. It was also a position that required navigating the specific kind of fame that Magnum PI generated. That level of success creates pressures that are not immediately obvious from the outside. The expectation that you will be Thomas Magnum perpetually, the industry's tendency to see the character rather than the actor, the difficulty of making choices that serve the performer's long-term interests rather than the show's immediate commercial ones. Garner had been through an equivalent experience with Maverick and then again with the Rockford Files. He understood what it felt like to be so thoroughly identified with a character that the industry struggled to see past it, and he had figured out how to manage that situation without either surrendering to it entirely or being consumed by resentment of it. That specific knowledge, hard won, and not available anywhere else, was what he offered Selleck during the years they spent working alongside each other. And Selleck, characteristically, paid attention. So what exactly happened when they were in the same professional space, and why did it change the way Selleck saw the work itself? The specific context in which Tom Selleck and James Garner worked together most closely involved projects that brought them into the kind of extended professional proximity that reveals character in ways that a single meeting or a brief collaboration cannot. What Selleck has described from that period is not a series of memorable conversations or specific pieces of advice delivered in quotable form. It is something more cumulative and more significant. The experience of watching someone function consistently in ways that confirmed rather than contradicted the impression those around him had formed at a distance. Garner was, in professional settings, exactly who he appeared to be. That consistency is rarer than it sounds in an industry built on the management of appearances. The specifics Selleck has mentioned include Garner's treatment of crew members, which was characterized by the same consideration and attention that he brought to his interactions with directors and fellow cast members of equivalent or greater status. In practical terms, this meant remembering names, asking genuine questions, and treating the ordinary social courtesies of professional interaction as genuine rather than performative. This sounds like a low bar. In the specific environment of a successful television production, where the hierarchy of the set tends to reinforce the idea that certain people's time and comfort matter more than others, it was not a low bar at all. Garner also demonstrated something about how to handle the frustrations that come with any long-running production. The repetitive nature of shooting schedules, the conflicts between creative instincts and commercial requirements, the management of relationships with network and studio executives whose priorities do not always align with the performers. He handled those frustrations with a combination of humor and proportion that Selleck found instructive, not because Garner was falsely cheerful about genuine problems, but because he had developed the perspective to distinguish between problems that actually mattered and the much larger category of things that felt like problems but were actually just the ordinary friction of doing difficult work in a complicated industry. Selleck has also spoken about the specific way Garner talked about acting itself, with a notable absence of the pretension that the profession sometimes generates. Garner did not discuss his craft in terms that elevated it beyond what it actually was. He was doing a job he was very good at, in a profession he understood thoroughly, and his relationship with the work was practical and clear-eyed rather than romanticized. For Selleck, who had encountered plenty of the other approach, this directness was itself a form of instruction. And beyond the professional, there was a more personal dimension that has been less frequently examined. How did Garner's example shape the private life that Selleck chose to build during the years when the temptations to blur the two were most intense? Garner had been married to Lois Clark since 1956, a marriage that lasted until his death in 2014, spanning nearly 6 decades and most of his professional life. In an industry where long marriages are uncommon enough to be remarked upon, the Garner marriage was notable both for its duration and for its apparent quality. Garner spoke about his wife in terms that made clear the marriage was not a public relations arrangement or a comfortable habit, but a genuine partnership that he valued above his professional achievements. Selleck was paying attention. His own first marriage, to model Jacqueline Ray, which lasted from 1971 to 1982, ended before Magnum PI had run its full course. He had adopted her son Kevin during that marriage, a decision that reflected his genuine commitment to the relationship and to the responsibilities that came with it, and the end of the marriage was something he processed privately, without public commentary and without the performance of either bitterness or false equanimity. His second marriage, to actress and dancer Gilly Mack in 1987, has lasted, and the way it has lasted reflects a set of priorities that Garner's example helped him articulate. He met Gilly in London while attending a performance of Cats, and the relationship that developed was built around a shared understanding of what they both actually wanted from their lives rather than what the industry suggested they should want. What they wanted included privacy, a stable home environment, and the kind of ordinary daily life that is difficult to maintain when a career is organized entirely around visibility. They built that life on a 60-acre avocado ranch in Hidden Valley near Thousand Oaks, California, a property with some Hollywood history of its own, having been previously owned by Dean Martin. Selleck has described the ranch with genuine affection across multiple decades of interviews, talking about the physical work of maintaining it with the satisfaction of someone who finds manual labor grounding rather than inconvenient. Their daughter Hannah, born in 1988, grew up on that ranch and developed her own serious commitment to equestrian sports. Selleck has said directly that watching Garner navigate his own career without sacrificing the things that actually mattered to him was part of what made him understand that the choice was available to be made. So what is it that Selleck is finally saying out loud at 80 that he had not said quite so plainly before, and why does the timing matter? There is a specific quality to the things Tom Selleck has said about James Garner in recent years that distinguishes them from ordinary tribute or the routine praise that public figures offer each other in the context of interviews and award ceremonies. The quality is weight. He is not paying tribute to a colleague. He is describing a debt that he has carried for a long time and has decided to finally articulate in full, and the decision to do that at 80 reflects something about where he is in his own life and what has become important to say. Garner died in July of 2014 at the age of 86, at his home in Los Angeles. His death came quietly, from natural causes, which was in keeping with how he had lived, without drama or announcement, doing things his own way until he stopped. Selleck has spoken about the loss with the particular tone that people use when they are describing the departure of someone who had functioned as a kind of fixed point in their understanding of the world. What Selleck has said most clearly at this stage of his life is that Garner represented a standard, not in the abstract sense that the word is usually used, but in the concrete sense of a person who demonstrated through consistent daily behavior what it actually looks like to do the job well and live the life well simultaneously. He has said that he is still, in his own understanding of himself, working toward that standard. That is a remarkable thing for a man with Selleck's record of achievement to say about anyone. He has also been candid about something that is less often acknowledged in accounts of professional mentorship: the emotional dimension of having been genuinely seen and genuinely supported by someone at the moment in a career when the need for that kind of attention is most acute. Garner took Selleck seriously before the culture's verdict on Selleck's talent and staying power was fully in. He treated him as a colleague worth engaging with during a period when Selleck was still establishing what kind of performer he was going to be. That kind of early, unconditional regard is something that people carry forward across entire lives, and Selleck has been honest about the fact that he carries it. The Blue Bloods years, which gave Selleck a second defining television role in Frank Reagan, the patriarch of a New York law enforcement family, allowed him to demonstrate what Garner's example looked like applied across a long career. He brought to that role the same qualities he learned to value by watching Garner: the absence of vanity about the work, the genuine investment in the people around him on set, the capacity to bring warmth and complexity to a character without requiring the character to be more than it actually is. At 80, the truth he is telling about James Garner is not really about Garner. It is about what he chose to become, and who helped him understand that the choice was his to make. If Tom Selleck spent 50 years quietly carrying what James Garner gave him, applying it daily without making a public point of it, what does that say about the kind of influence that actually shapes a person versus the kind that simply makes a good story? Share your thoughts in the comments below. For more stories like this one, click on the next video on your screen right now.